Countermeasures. Today's viruses are much more complex than the early boot sector viruses that brought malware to the attention of IT users. They are also just one of several types of malware that now pose threats to information assets. Other common forms of malware include worms, exploit vulnerabilities in operating system OSs, network services, and applications to propagate and cause damage. Keyloggers capture keystrokes and transmit them to the attacker. Video frame grabbers copy the content of what appears on a computer display and transmit it to the attacker. Rootkits hide the presence of themselves and other malware. Trojan horses appears to be legitimate but in fact contain malware such as keyloggers and spyware. The countermeasures developed for detecting viruses can often detect other forms of malware as well. Deploying antivirus programs on client devices and scanning network traffic as it enters the network are appropriate countermeasures for combating malware. In addition, locking down client devices, for example, denying most users the privileges needed to install software or update the Windows registry, can prevent the installation of malware that manages to avoid detection. Another effectively but easily overlooked countermeasure is security awareness training. It is common knowledge known now that you should not open an email attachment sent from someone you do not know. Less well known are tips such as avoiding sites that may harbor malware, such as peer-to-peer file sharing sites, and not downloading browser plugins that may be Trojan horses. Keeping users aware of the changing tricks and techniques used by malware developers and cyber attackers is an effective complement to the technical countermeasures that are essential to preventing information assets or preserving information assets. Basic steps for attacking methodology. Survey and assess. Surveying and assessing the potential target are done in tandem. The first step an attacker usually takes is to survey the potential target to identify and assess its characteristics. These characteristics may include its supported services and protocols together with potential vulnerabilities and entry points. The attacker uses that information gathered in the survey and assess the phase to plan an initial attack. For example, an attacker can detect a cross-site scripting XSS vulnerability by testing to see if any controls in a web page echo back output, exploit, and penetrate. Having surveyed a potential target, the next step is to exploit and penetrate. If the network and host are fully secured, your application, the front gate, becomes the next channel for attack. For an attacker, the easiest way into an application is through the same entrance the legitimate users use, for example, through the application's logon page or a page that does not require authentication. Escalating privileges. After attackers manage to compromise an application or network, perhaps by injecting code into an application or creating an authenticated session with the Microsoft Windows 2000 operating system, they immediately attempt to escalate privileges. Specifically, they look for administration privileges provided by accounts that are members of an administrators group. They also seek out the high level of privileges offered by the local system account. Using least privileged services accounts throughout your application is a primary defense against privilege escalation attacks. Also, many network-level privilege escalation attacks require an interactive logon session. Maintain access. Having gained access to a system, an attacker takes steps to make sure for future access easier and to cover his or her tracks. Common approaches for making future access easier include planting backdoor programs, or using an existing account that lacks strong protection. Covering tracks typically involves clearing logs and hiding tools. As such, audit logs are a primary target for the attacker. Log files should be secured and they should be analyzed on a regular basis. Log files analysis can often uncover the early signs of an attempted break in before damage is done. Deny service. Attackers who cannot gain access often mount a denial of service attack to prevent others from using the application. For other attackers, the denial of service option is their goal from the outset. An example is the SYN flood attack, where the attacker uses a program to send a flood of TCP SYN requests to fill the pending connection queue on the server. This prevents other users from establishing network connections. Understanding threat categories. While there are many variations of specific attacks and attack techniques, it is useful to think about these in terms of what the attacker is trying to achieve. This changes your focus from the identification of every specific attack, which is really just a means to an end, to focusing on the end results of possible attacks. Stride. Threats faced by the application can be categorized based on the goals and purposes of the attacks. A working knowledge of these categories of threats can help you organize a security strategy so that you have planned responses to threats. Stride is the acronym used at Microsoft to categorize different types of threats. Stride stands for spoofing. Spoofing is an attempt to gain access to a system by using a false identity. This can be accomplished using a stolen user credentials or a false IP address. After the attacker successfully gains access as a legitimate user or a host, elevation of privileges or abuse using authorization can begin. Tampering. Tampering is the unauthorized modification of data, for example, as it follows or as it flows over a network between two computers. Repudiation. Repudiation is the ability of users, legitimate or otherwise, to deny that they performed specific actions or transactions. Without adequate auditing, repudiation attacks are difficult to prove. Information disclosure. Information disclosure is the unwanted exposure of private data. For example, a user views the contents of a table or file he or she is not authorized to open, or monitors data passed in plain text over a network. Some examples of information disclosure vulnerabilities include the use of hidden forms fields, comments embedded in web pages that contains database connection strings and connection details, and weak exception handling that can lead to internal system level details being revealed to the client. Any of this information can be very useful to the attacker. Denial of service. Denial of service is the process of making a system or application unavailable. For example, a denial of service attack might be accomplished by bombarding a server with requests to consume all available system resources, or by pressing it malformed or by passing it malformed input data that can crash an application process. Elevation of privileges. Elevation of privilege occurs when a user with limited privileges assumes that the identity of a privileged user is to gain privileged access to an application. For example, an attacker with limited privileges might elevate his or her privilege level to compromise and take control of a highly privileged and trusted process or account.